World of Tanks 2.0 has been out for a while, and Tier 11 is now an established fact in the game. We have 15 brand new tanks at this tier. Check out these videos of some of them if you haven't already. And a few more Tier 11s are also confirmed and are on its way. In today's video though, we're gonna take a look at what the rest of the game's nation's Tier 11 tanks could possibly be, and what their respective mechanics could be. Me and Edvin have been putting all of our 2.5 brain cells together for this video and researched a bunch of obscure material to form these entries, so strap in. We're gonna maintain a quick tempo so as to not make the video too long, so if it feels like I'm giving too little info of each tank, it's because I am. Lol. If you do want more info of each tank though, I will provide sources about every single entry in the description below. Some of these sources are not in English though, so have a translator tool ready. Let us know in the comments if you have any particular thoughts about any of these ideas. Alright, let's go. Starting off with the Jagdpanzer E100, we have two proposals for what the Tier 11 could possibly be. Both are based on real historical records, but one is more real than the other. The first proposal is Sturmtiger. What is there to say? It has a massive gun, it makes sense as an upgrade to the Jagdpanzer. Yeah, I know it's a mortar, but you can make it fire HE or whatever, but if you do disagree, we do have another option. The Sturmgeschütz auf Mausfahrzeug. Yeah. It's a Jagdpanzer E100, but with a mouse as a basis. The mechanic of either these two would be mortar shell. Pressing X will make the tank stop and ready up a powerful shell for 5 seconds before the shell leaves the barrel. The shell does devastating damage, let's say around 2000 if it pens. The shell velocity will also be horrible on this shell. Next up, the Panzer 7. It was hard to find anything historical that could act as an upgrade to this tank, but we did find something very obscure. The Selbstfahrst Fett mit Absensbarer 15 cm SFH 18 version 1, however you pronounce that, which was basically an artillery piece with a thick Panther hull. The modules would need to be modified to be viable in-game though. Mechanic. Short-range artillery. Press X to enter an artillery view. You can only shoot within 200 meters from your tank and you're only firing regular HE shells, and you have 4 shells per game at your disposal. For the E100 it was very hard to find something historical that could act as a natural evolution, so I've had to look at some fictional concepts instead. First off, we have this model made by Zinovy Alexeyev, which is gonna be a common name throughout this video. I have used his research for a lot of these references, as he's a proficient Russian tank historian and tank enthusiast. He has also created some military fictions of his own. This tank he has made is called Standartenpanzerkampfwagen 11. Another fictional idea is to use the Panzer 9, which was a made-up propaganda tank during World War II. I think this one could be very interesting in-game, as it was kind of real in the minds of soldiers during the war. Anyhow, the mechanic for the Tier 11 E100 would be kinetic battery. Receiving shells in this tank, regardless if they are penning shots or ricochets, will build up a meter. When the meter is filled, you can press X to heal, for example, 100 hit points. Then the meter is reset to 0 again. The E50M was also troublesome when it comes to natural evolutions, so I went with fiction again. Another one of Zinovy Alexeyev's designs fit pretty well in this line. It's called Standartenpanzerkampfwagen 14. Mechanic. Engine overload. Pressing X makes you switch into engine overload mode. This mode will improve your top speed, terrain resistance, and you will be resistant to ramming damage. However, there are also massive drawbacks when in this mode to make it balanced. A penning shot to the engine now has a 100% chance to set you on fire, and being in the mode for too long also sets the engine on fire, and you cannot fire your gun in this mode. You must also be standing still to activate this mode. The Object 268 version 4 will become the AwesomeEpicGuys, which has a 152 BL8 gun. It is based on a drawing made by a famous Soviet tank designer named Nikolai Fedorovich Szachmurin. I'm sure I pronounced that correctly. Its mechanic will be energy battery. When you are moving over 40 kph in this tank, you slowly build up a meter. When the meter is filled, you can press X to activate powered mode. This mode will increase ramming damage and shell damage you inflict by 30% for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, the mode ends and you need to rebuild the meter again. For the Object 268, we have two tank proposals to present. Either the Object 261 Variation 1, which is a heavy self-propelled gun based on the IS-7 that carries a 152mm gun, or the ZIK-20 SPG that is based on the KV-1 and carries a 203mm gun. You pick your favorite. Whatever the option would be, the mechanic would be assault mode / support mode. Pressing X will toggle between assault mode and support mode. Switching between modes takes 2 seconds. When in assault mode, aim time and accuracy will be reduced, but reload and top speed will be increased. When in support mode, aim time and accuracy will be improved, but reload and top speed will be reduced. The Object 277 will become the Object 770, which is also known as the last heavy tank. Damn. It was developed parallel with the Object 277 and was described as being better in every single way, so it makes a perfect evolution in our opinion. Mechanic: ultra reliable shell. Pressing X will make the next shell you fire do exactly the average damage of it, and will do an exact average penetration roll and will be fired in the exact trajectory where you aim. Basically, all RNG will be removed from the next fire shell. 2-minute recharge. The Object 705A will become the KV-4 Buganov. The KV-4 tank concept had tons of iterations and different designs, and one of them was the KV-4 Buganov. It will need to have modified modules and values to be viable as a tier 11 tank, however. Mechanic: sub-turret sentry. Pressing X will activate the sub-turret on the top of your tank. It will have a simple AI that will shoot at targets close to you but will prioritize tanks on your flank. Pressing X again will reset it to its original position and deactivate the AI. The front of the sub-turret is very strong, but the sides are weak, so having it activated might expose the sides of it. So deactivating the turret and activating it again can be a tactical advantage or disadvantage. The IS-4 will become the Object 279. Alright, I know what you're thinking. The armor is gonna be broken. I mean, probably. But there's always a way to make things balance. Just make the gun hopeless or something, or make the traverse speed sluggish. It's a very historical tank that definitely deserves the spotlight, and we think it would perfectly fit as the king of the IS-4 line. The mechanic will be pretty tame though, so not make it too broken. Mechanic: all-terrain mode / traversal mode. Pressing X makes you toggle between all-terrain mode and traversal mode. Toggling between modes takes 2 seconds. In all-terrain mode, your ground resistance and traverse speed is improved, but your top speed is worse. In traversal mode, your top speed is improved, but your terrain resistance and traverse speed is worse. For the ST2, it's been a wild ride to find something that would fit in the line. I've actually found 3 different options. I'll present them from least appealing to most appealing in our opinion. Firstly, the Object 288 KB-LKZ. The guns are placed very far away from each other though, which would probably be kind of problematic in game. Then we have Szachmurin's tank of extreme parameters, another drawing made by the Soviet tank designer Szachmurin. And finally, the Object 490 Poplar, a late 70s / early 80s tank project. This one is our personal favorite. The mechanic for any of these would be the Soviet double barrel mechanic, of course, plus a machine gun mechanic. Press X to fire the machine gun from the turret, has a 40-second recharge. Can damage slowly armored surfaces with a small burst of damage. Object 140 will become the T-72, a very famous and historical tank that is still somewhat relevant today. Mechanic: battle spirit. Press X to make you and surrounding teammates 10% better in everything. If you do assistance, damage, block damage, this ability will recharge faster. 3-minute base recharge. The K91 will become the K91-3. I'll have to dwell here for a while to explain the mess that is the World of Tanks version of the K91 tanks. So the K91 tier 10 we have in game is is kind of a half historical, half fictional hybrid concept. Historically, there was a K91 project with 3 design proposals. The K91 Option 1 with a turret in front, which is in World of Tanks a Tier 9 premium tank called the K91-2. The K91 Option 2, which in World of Tanks the Tier 10 Tech Tree tank is inspired by, but the Tier 10 Tech Tree tank uses the turret and the hull of the K91 Option 1, but the design layout of the K91 Option 2. K91 Option 3 is the SPG proposal, which we have in-game as a Tier 9 tank destroyer called K91 PT. However, none of these in-game tanks uses the modules of the historical K91 Option 2, which could then form the Tier 11 of this tech tree. I guess we could call it K91-3 in-game or something. Historically, this proposal had an autoloader, which could make a cool upgrade for this tank. In-game, these tanks take on a sneaky sniper role though, so here's our thought about the mechanic. Smoke screen. Press X to release a smoke screen that creates a field of camouflage with the same mechanical properties as a bush, which then disappears after a few seconds. This mechanic will have a 2-minute recharge. For the T100 LT, we have 2 proposals and 2 mechanics, and both of them are very flat tanks, just like the T100. The first one is the Object 775. Historically, this tank could fire missiles, so the mechanic will be thematically tied to that. Mechanic, rocket shell. Press X to fire a missile from your barrel, which has the same properties of an HE shell. This shell can be fired at any time without recharge, but you are limited to 4 per game. The second proposal is the Object 911B. Historically, it had 2 track layouts proposed, which would change the height of the tank. This could translate well into a mechanic, a sort of track mechanic. Track layout shift. Press X to switch between the 2 track layouts. It takes 5 seconds to switch and you need to be stationary. The taller mode gives less balance and less camo, but more speed. The shorter mode gives less speed, but more balance and more camo. The different modes could probably be very useful for different hull down positions. The T110E4 was tricky to find any worthy successors to. We have to be a bit creative. Do you remember the Astron Rex? It's a premium tank based on a historical concept. This concept had 6 options. One of them being this thing, the Rex 5. We think this thing has some E4 DNA in its design and could make a goofy Tier 11 tank destroyer. It would probably need to be modified to be viable though. Mechanic, variable rotation alpha damage. We were thinking, the whole niche with the E4 tech tree is that they have turrets while still being tank destroyers. So I think making a mechanic related to the turret would be appropriate and interesting. And the idea is that depending on your turret rotation angle, you will have different alpha damage. For example, when a turret is facing forwards, between 90 degrees left and right for example, you will have normal alpha damage, let's say 750. But when the turret is facing backwards, between 90 degrees left and right backwards for example, the alpha damage will be, for example, 825. This will force you to show your rear, which will be extremely risky, but have a higher reward. But the most awkward position to be in is to be showing your side to the enemy. So I'm thinking if the turret is facing completely sideways, the alpha will be at its highest, for example 900. This type of mechanic could give this underplayed tech tree some real dynamics and novelty. A little mechanic noise and some icon could communicate which alpha damage is currently active. The T110E3 will become the Hunter, which is a crazy name for actually being a historical concept. At its thickest, it has 450mm of armor, which suits the line perfectly. It does have a turret, but it can only rotate in a 180-degree radius. The biggest clash though is that it has 2 guns, but you could make it so that the guns fire in cycles, shifting guns every time you fire. Perhaps give it a 2-shell autoloader even. This gun cycling mechanic and a potential 2-shot autoloader would be enough of a change for the tech tree instead of a completely new mechanic, in our opinion. The Joe tank will become another Joe tank, the M7 Joe, which is the only tank left in the Joe tank concept to use. Alright, settle in for the mechanic. Improved reserve track. and track trap. First off, the improved reserve track. This allows you to move at almost, but not exactly full speed when your normal tracks fall off. And then the track trap. This tank's tracks act as traps when they fall off and are placed on the ground. If an enemy collides with them, they get tracked themselves. The track trap also gets removed when collided with. You can also press X to deliberately shave off both your tracks and place them on the ground, even if you only have one track left. The respective track trap will be removed from the ground and replaced at your tank when the track has been repaired. The T-57 Heavy will become the T-58 Heavy. Wow, not the most original idea in the shed, but it makes sense. The tank was proposed to have a 155mm gun, which is gonna be absolutely nuts in-game, but hey, it's fun. Mechanic, stabilizer mode. Pressing X will dramatically reduce the turret and gun traverse speed, and also lock the turret into a 180-degree angle from the angle you activated the mode in, but significantly improve the aim time and dispersion. Takes 2 seconds to activate and 2 seconds to deactivate. For the Sheridan, I found 2 wacky tanks to propose. One is a concept and the other is an existing tank. The concept is called XM808152, which is a Sheridan on wheels and has a hull that is split into 2 parts. The mechanic would be as follows. 1. It now has wheels. 2. It now has articulation, which means the hull is split in 2 and each part has an independent movement axis. Wouldn't have crazy implications, but who knows. The real tank idea is the M8 armored gun system, which was historically made to replace the Sheridan, so I think it makes sense as a tier 11. It has a smaller caliber gun than the Sheridan, but perhaps it would be a DPM type of derp instead of an alpha big boom kind of derp. You can speculate about that. Anyhow, the mechanic. Noise shot. Press X to fire a stunning shot that does 0 damage but will stun the target for 10 seconds if hit. Cooldown 2 minutes. The Zwhatsh B will become the ERAC 120mm, which historically had 12 shells in the magazine with its 120mm gun. 12 shells might be broken, so maybe reduce it to 8. Or something. We have 2 mechanic proposal to make for this tank. It could either have both or just one of them. Mechanic number 1, ammo recovery. Every time you penetrate a shell, a meter will progressively fill up. When the meter is filled, you will regain 8 additional shells to your shell storage. Press X to toggle which shell type you want to be refilled. Mechanic number 2, penetration leveling. Every shell you pen within a clip or a magazine will increase the average pen of the next shell with, for example, 20 pen. The penetration will reset to default when you reload or empty your clip. For the AMX M454, it was difficult to find anything historical to go off with, so it's gonna be fiction again. Here we have the AMX 54 Napoleon, which is again designed by Zinoviev Alexev. Mechanic, brute. Every shell you penetrate, you increase the value on the brute meter by 25%. And if you get a kill, you increase the meter by 50%. When the meter is filled, you can press X and the next shell will deal 50% more damage. AMX 1305 will become the Mars 15 TML 105, which is described as the successor of the AMX 13 series. Unfortunately, it failed. It did not have an autoloader historically though, which would clash a bit with the rest of the tree, but that could be solved with a mechanic reserve shell. Press X to reload instantly, 40-second cooldown. However, you could also say fuck historical accuracy and just give it a 4-shell autoloader anyways. In that case, we do have another mechanic in mind. Reconnaissance Commando. If your spotting damage is higher than your hit points, your reload and intraclip time is reduced by, for example, 50% for the rest of the game. EBR 105 will become the Panhard M8. The mechanic we will add is simply the rev up mechanic, which was scrapped from the super test version of the EBRs, which allows you to turbo into full speed from a standstill with the help of the brake key. FV4005 Stage 2 will become the FV4005 Stage 1, which is just a shit barn without its huge barn turret, which will be a significant upgrade, as the huge turret is probably its main weak point. And here is the mechanic, recoil spade. Pressing X will deploy the spade located in the back of the hull and dig itself into the ground, effectively immobilizing the hull of the tank. It takes 3 seconds to enter the mode and 3 seconds to exit it. While in this mode, your reload is reduced and your dispersion is improved. Super Conqueror will become the MLC-60 concept number 1. Mechanic, turret heat generator, similar to the ability of the tier 11 E100, but you need to be hit in the turret. When the turret receives fire, penning shots or ricochets, a meter will build. When the meter is full, you can press X to heal, for example, 100 hit points, and then the meter resets. This might be a controversial pick, but anyhow, here we go. Centurion AX will become the Centurion AVRE. This might be a dramatic shift in gameplay from the AX, but how else are we gonna shove in the AVREs into this game? This tank will have a major drawback to balance the large gun it has. The turret won't be fully rotatable. It will be limited to 140 degrees left and right, and the turret traverse speed will also be very sluggish. The gun handling will also be atrocious. However, when you deploy the mechanic, this will change. Mechanic, shovel sentry. This lowers the frontal shovel into the ground, which takes 3 seconds to do. When deployed, the shovel will act as protective spaced armor for your lower plate, but you cannot traverse or move the hull of the tank when deployed. However, you can now fully traverse your turret, and the turret traverse speed is now significantly improved, as well as the general gun handling of the gun. You cannot exit this mode if the turret is facing backwards or beyond the 140 degree angles. For the Concept 5, we could unfortunately not find any interesting reference material for what the tier 11 could possibly be, historical nor fictional. But we do have a mechanic for whatever this tier 11 could possibly be. Mechanic, stealth mode. Press X to switch between normal mode and stealth mode. Switching takes 3 seconds. In the stealth mode, you increase your camo value, but significantly decrease your top speed, and you remove your ability to fire your gun. The Manticore will become the Chimera 1955 option 1. Historically, the Manticore is actually called the Chimera 1955, but Wargaming thought people would be confused by the name since we already have a Chimera in the game, so they gave it a new name, which I think is very dumb, honestly. So I guess this in-game tank could be called the Manticore 180 or something, because yes, this thing was proposed to have a 180mm gun, which would make the tier 11 tank. To balance the gun, it would be barely useful at all. It will have absolutely abysmal gun handling with an extreme shell limit. Historically, it only had 5 shells, for example. However, thanks to the mechanic we have proposed, the gun would instead be mostly used for something else. Mechanic, recoil boost. Shooting a shell while pointing the gun backwards will accelerate you from 0 to almost top speed immediately. Perfect for escaping a tight situation when you get spotted. Shooting backwards while already moving will also give you a slight speed boost. This boost mechanic would create a balance strategy where you either spend the few shells you have to do some damage, or you reserve your shells to use as a mobility tool. The U.S.A 111-5A will become the U.S.A 1224, a historical machine. Mechanic, automatic loader mode. Pressing X activates the automatic loader mode, which halves the reload speed for 20 seconds. 2-minute recharge time. The 121 will become the U.S.A 1221. This thing could actually launch missiles in real life, so that's what the mechanic is gonna be about. Mechanic, anti-tank missiles. Launch a missile shell, which will function like an HE shell. It will travel in an arc. However, upon hitting, it guarantees exactly 200 damage on the target. You have 4 of these shells per game and 10 seconds recharge between the next usage. The U.S.A 1321 will become the Type 63I. Since the Chinese light tank's niche is being more well-rounded for combat than other lights, we figured a combat-oriented mechanic would be in order. Mechanic, rage mode. All gun-related statistics are boosted by 5% until you exit the mode. However, as long as the mode is active, you lose 1% of your hit points per second. for the Hori 3, there wasn't really any historical material that could fit the line, so we have to dig into fantasy again. I found this military fiction model called the Hauga that could potentially be what a tier 11 Japanese tank destroyer could look like. Mechanic, heat up. As time goes, a meter fills up. The more the meter is filled, the higher your shell velocity will be, and also the higher your penetration will be. Firing your gun will empty the meter by 35%. For the evolution of the Type 5 Heavy, there is not really any historical material to go on. We can only imagine what such a tank would look like. We could call it the Type 6 Heavy, as popularly proposed. I did find this artwork that could be what a tier 11 could look like. It's already very similar to the Type 4 and 5, but it lacks the large cupola, which would be a huge upgrade. The gun is also slightly different, among some other smaller details. For the mechanic, we want to propose a similar mechanic to the Taschenrate, sub-turret machine guns. Pressing X will fire the guns located in the small turret, which is in front of the tank, which will be efficient to deal with lowly armored targets and lowly armored weak spots. The small turrets will move simultaneously with the main turret, but will be blocked by the hull when trying to aim more than 180 degrees, left or right. For the STB-1, we have two options that we have found. Option number one is that it will become the Type 74E, which historically could use a dozer blade, which we think could work as a fun mechanic for this tank. Mechanic. Pressing X will toggle the position of the dozer blade. It takes 3 seconds to toggle between modes, and you need to be stationary to toggle. In position number one, the blade is protecting your upper plate and your lower turret, which will enhance hull down gameplay. In position number two, it's protecting your lower plate, which will enhance regular assaults and ramming damage. The dozer blade is not impenetrable, but will provide a layer of spaced armor. The second tank option we have for the successor of the STB-1 is the Komatsu 105 GSR, which was historically a tank destroyer, but World of Tanks threw out historical accuracy a long time ago, and gameplay-wise I think it would fit the medium line of World of Tanks. The mechanic we have planned for this tank is the Guard Tower mode. It takes 3 seconds to activate and 3 seconds to deactivate. When this mode is active, you become immobile, but your rate of fire increases and your turret traverse and turret traverse speed becomes extremely fluid, almost precisely syncing up with your mouse movement. The VZ55 will become the Tatra T-34, which is a speculative recreation by Zinovy Alexev of a sighting of a mysterious tank by the CIA in 1955. For more info of this tank and some other Czech mythical tanks, check out the sources in the description below. Mechanic. Reload burst. When you are fully loaded, press X to get slightly quicker intro clip reload on your magazine, but get a longer full magazine reload as a penalty. 1 minute recharge. TVP T50/51 will become the Tatra T35, which is military fiction, created by Zinovy Alexev again. The mechanic will be exactly the same as of the Tatra T34, which we previously mentioned. The Tesak will become the BOBRA, which is a very obscure vehicle with not much info on it. Other than that, it was adapted from the OT62 Topaz, which could actually also work as another option as the tier 11 if you tweak the modules a bit. Since the Czech lights are a bit of a wild card light tank tech tree, they don't really excel at anything except for having the machine gun mechanic. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what a mechanic that goes well with their gameplay should be. In our experience, the weakest aspect of the Czech lights is unironically their ability to be lights, to spot. So we have decided that their mechanic should be focused on that. Mechanic. Recon plane works like it does in Frontline. A plane lights up a location of choice. To balance this mechanic, the recharge time will be very lengthy, 4 minutes, and this mechanic cannot be used in the first 1 minute of the battle. The 60 TP will become, I don't know, there aren't any historical references we can pick from here. It's gonna have to be something fictional again. However, we can at least be inspired by established designs. This is the Solg Panzernik, which is a very infamous fictional Polish tank, and could be how a tier 11 Polish heavy could look like. We have two proposed mechanics. Mechanic number 1, arc shell. Press X to fire a double HE shell from the extra turret in the back. The shells travel in an arc and can lob over debris. 1 minute recharge. Mechanic number 2, area effect shell. Press X to charge the next shell you fire. If you pen the shell, it will stun every other enemy within a specific area of the shell. 2 minute recharge. The
Błyskawica
will become the Błyskawica 2. Again, Polish high-tier tanks are difficult to find historical references for, so again we have to go with fiction. The Polish TD seems to be aesthetically inspired by historical Polish tankettes though, so imagine for example the TKS-D converted into a massive assault TD, and we have ourselves a tier 11 Polish TD. Mechanic, rifled gun mechanic plus reverse shot. The rifled gun mechanic from the rest of the tech tree will still be relevant on this tier 11. However, an additional mechanic will be added, the reverse shot. If you hold the fire button, just like a Soviet double barrel tank, you can charge up a reverse shot. When fully charged, it will fire a shell that reverses the damage per distance of the tank, which means it will do more damage the longer the shell has traveled. This will give this tank an ability to do high damage while sniping as well. However, at the cost of having to charge up the shell if it wants to do damage, so landing the shell might actually be tricky. And another penalty will be, after firing a reverse shell, you will also get a 5-second penalty to your reload. U.S.A 1516 will become the U.S.A 19, or alternatively the U.S.A 14A. Any of them would be interesting for the tech tree. We have two options for what the mechanic could be, or any of these two. Option number 1 would be a copy-paste of the mechanic we have planned for the Komatsu, the guard tower mode. It takes 3 seconds to activate and 3 seconds to deactivate. When this mode is active, you become immobile, but your rate of fire increases, and your turret traverse and turret traverse speed becomes extremely fluid, almost precisely syncing up with your mouse movement. Mechanic option number 2 is an aggressive siege mechanic. It takes 3 seconds to activate and 3 seconds to deactivate. In this mode, your top speed is decreased by 90%, your turret traverse speed is decreased by 50%, but your DPM increases by 50%. Kranvagn will become the Stridsvagn 2000, a very, for its time, futuristic tank project. If this tank is too futuristic though, another option could be the STRV-A, a blueprint tank project. The mechanic for any of these will be heat shield generator. Receiving shells, either pens or bounces, slowly builds a meter. When the meter is filled, you can press X to instantly reload an entire magazine, then the meter will reset. Minotauro will become the, I just came up with his name on the spot, the Larisauro, because again, we're in a situation where there is no historical material to pick from. So, we're going into the world of fiction. The Italian TDs seems to be aesthetically inspired by the FMBT-80 tank project though, so a tier 11 could look something like this. The mechanic we have proposed is quick shot. At any time during an intra-clip reload, you can press X to invest 2 shells from the magazine to fire a normal single shell. When used, there will be a 1-minute cooldown until you can use quick shot again. For the tier 11, for the Rinoceronte, we will either have to go with a fictional tank or pick a modified version of the C1 Ariete prototype. The Italian heavy tank line's niche is auto-reloaders, but the very historical Ariete prototype did not have an autoloader in real life, so that would have to be added to be natural for the line. Mechanic, burst mode. Pressing X will make the intra-clip reload speed 50% faster for 20 seconds. Recharge 3 minutes. And finally, the Progetto 65. We can either go with fiction here, or we can pick something very historical that however might be controversial, but that still somewhat fits the line in our opinion. The B1 Centauro. It is a tank destroyer on wheels. This machine did not have an autoloader historically either, but its evolution, the B2 Centauro, did. So we could give this World of Tanks version an auto-reloader as sort of a what-if scenario to fit the tech tree. For the mechanic, the vehicle has wheels now. That's the mechanic. But if that's not enough, give it a smoke screen, just like with our K91-3 idea. And that's all the tanks. Oh, right. Artillery. We haven't really bothered to dig around for any historical references what these could be, but we do have a mechanic in mind for all of them. Press X to explode. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been quite of a long-ass project to make, honestly, so a like and subscribe or a comment about anything would be appreciated. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye-bye!